I'm sure we all can remember a time, whether recently in the past, experiencing a crazy storm and looking outside the window and seeing trees just going everywhere. And no matter how windy it got, the tree never breaking. Hi, yeah, my name is Tiffany, and in this video, I'm sharing why leaders, honestly, really anyone who is navigating life, are often stronger when they are like the willow tree instead of the oak tree. And I just want to start by saying that leadership and life often feel like storms are never too far in the distance. Either you're coming through one, you're in the middle of one, or you're just leaving one. And pressure builds, expectations arise, and all of that is how you respond, or all of that helps you understand and see how you respond reveals your true strengths. And I remember not too, I want to say not too long ago, a few years ago, and this is years into my leadership journey at this point. But the difference in the difference in this time was the type of leadership that I had or have. And my leader told me, and this is on the heels of an experience where I wasn't proud of, where my ego got in the way and my authority was challenged, and I allowed someone to pull me out of character just because of their opinion of me. And it didn't matter that they were a problem employee. It doesn't matter. I should have been able to manage my emotions. But because I had not learned how to be like the willow instead of the oak tree, I found myself in a situation I was not proud of. And that is where my leader began to help me understand what that saying really means. And that moment really forced me to learn a new kind of strength, to bend like the willow rather than stand rigid like the oak. And that really changed the game for me ever since, because with the oak or with the willow tree, there is a certain sense of learning how to ebb and flow. And that is one of the most impactful lessons that I've learned thus far as a leader, and wish I would have learned it so much earlier. But to be like the willow and not the oak means to embrace flexibility. It means to embrace adaptability and resilience in life's challenges, rather than approaching situations with a rigid and unyielding stubbornness. And I can say that now I can say that I approach a lot of situations with a rigid, unyielding stubbornness because of triggers, because of things that I had experienced in the past before. But that's a whole nother conversation. I was triggered by this person. And so, because I was triggered, because I had I had unaddressed pain, trauma, whatever situations from the past, that it showed up. when this person questioned my authority. But if I had addressed those triggers beforehand, I would have been able to be more like a willow tree and understand that this person is entitled to think whatever they want about me and my leadership style, whatever, however it might be. And just because they think this way doesn't mean that I am this person. But because I am the person who is leading this person, leading this class, leading this team, that I have a choice. I have a choice to allow this person to, one, express themselves in a way that allows them to feel heard, but not in a way that takes away from who I am as well. And so the oak really represented here the rigidity and the steadfastness and the inclination to stand my ground no matter what. And you might say, well, yeah, especially if it's somebody who is a problem, you should stand your ground. Yes, in the sense, but not when it shuts down a situation, not when it shuts down the other person, not when it then antagonizes conflict and antagonizes an escalation in conflict. So in severe storms, the oak's rigid branches, they risk breaking, being uprooted. And life often looks a lot like that. And if we are not careful and want to just stick to being that rigid, steadfast, unyielding leader or person, unwillingness to compromise, an ego that struggles to accept change, even if that means accepting ideas or seeing yourself in a way that, hey, I didn't get this right. Or being like, okay, I'm open to hearing what you have to say. I have ran it through my filter. I don't agree, but I also want you to feel as though you have been able to speak your piece. Or refusing to let go of what is lost. All of those can become very limiting in our leadership journey. And when it comes down to loss, I just had that thought of that sense of control. And that's what it was for me, that if I could control the situation, if I could control the narrative, then maybe I could control some type of outcome, control some type of perception about me. And maybe that's what it boiled down to, because I hadn't addressed the fragility of my own self-perceptions. And so needing to control that by any means necessary, when it became threatened, became something that I had to attack back in a sense. But once I learned how to become the willow, learned how to ebb and flow, let go of control, allowing people to be people, to not feel as though you don't have to put your expectations, you don't have to put your filter of who you are on other people. You allow people to exist within who they are. life became so, it freed me up. It freed up my mental space because now I no longer have to keep this well oiled sense of just, everything going. Because when there are people in the mix, when there are people in the mix, there is always going to be an element that of things you cannot control. And you can try to control it. You can try to give yourself a sense of control, but you will lose respect. You will lose respect. And that's another thing. This is not to say to be a willow, to be a doormat, or to be um, someone who just allows people to walk all over them, or you lose your voice, or you don't develop real conflict resolution skills. But does, it does bring forth like real respect for yourself because you can sit in knowing that, like, no, I may not be everybody's favorite. I may not be your best friend, but I am going to lead you as best as I possibly can. I have your best intentions. I have good intentions toward you, and I'm going to operate it that way. So it may not win you any friends, but the respect aspect will be there. And I think that's another thing we have to get our minds around when it comes down to leadership is that sometimes it's not about making friends, it's just about having the respect aspect. And so, what becoming the willow started to mean to me was it started to represent wisdom because when you become a willow, you can open up yourself to those conflict resolution conversations, and you're bound to learn something about yourself. And those, you should take those things and consider them. It gives you a sense of grace, and not just grace for yourself, but grace for other people. Grace for other people, and realizing that when you're an oak tree, a lot of times you're operating out of assumption. But when you operate as a willow, you're ebbing and flowing. You're learning how to bend, not break. You leave room for grace in knowing that I may not know everything about what's happening with this situation, or I may not know everything about this situation. Let me leave room to uncover what's going on, and then making decisions, then adapting to that. You become so much more adaptable because it's supple branches and deep roots that allow us to bend and to sway and to survive the storms, because the leadership storms in general in life, I mean, they'll take you out if they can. And another thing, I'm thinking about roots, it's about being well planted. It's being well planted into the earth, grounded. And that's another thing about being a willow, being grounded in who you are, that you don't have to perform authority. You don't have to perform authority. You're able to accept new realities, new perspectives, even if you're not necessarily, even if it's not something you wanted or it's unwanted or you don't quite see it just yet, at least you can stay open. It's about adapting your approaches when you're facing obstacles and finding strength and vulnerability and knowing that it's okay to let go. You don't need to appear unbreakable. And so the leadership lessons or the life lessons we can take from this are, strength isn't always, standing tall. Sometimes it's about bending without breaking, being rooted, grounded. And flexibility doesn't always mean, flexibility doesn't mean weakness. It doesn't. It means trusting in your foundation. That's interesting because I'm just getting all of these different thoughts as I'm speaking, just with the flexibility and understanding that that's not weakness, because sometimes when we can be inflexible, that's weakness, because it's like, okay, then inflexibility, if you find that maybe you weren't right, or maybe there's a better way or a different way, then what does that say? That you're not smart, that you don't have it together, that you're not put together, that you're not worthy of being in this position. And so inflexibility can give us false sense of, knowing what's going on, when no, it's not. When flexibility is real strength. And you can be resilient, and you can approach any situation with resilience, because your values, being in purpose, and surely faith, and knowing that because those things are holding your feet on solid ground, that you don't have to be afraid of conflict. You don't have to be afraid of being wrong or being agreeing to disagree. And so I just wanted to share that, because those whose hope is in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on the wings like eagles, and they will run and not grow weary. They will walk and they will not be faint. we have scripture to strengthen every aspect of character growth we might go through. And some of the hardest lessons that we learn as leaders and really on any type of growth journey are the character ones. But scripture can be a guiding light because God is always working on developing us into the best version of ourselves. And we're not going to be done until we walk through those gates. And so um again, there's grace for all of this. And if you're in a position or you're someone who's experienced this, it's okay to recognize where you're at and in the places where you still are growing into the willow. When we're rooted in God, we can always expect to learn how to bend, but not break. So I just want to encourage us today. Life and leadership can be so messy. And if we decide to stay rigid like the oak, we can get stuck in pride. And a lot of that is rooted in fear and control. But we have the option to be willows, to get off the wall, to adapt and to act with courage and humility and discernment. So here on this channel, I just want to remind you guys that we are here to lead ourselves well, learn to lead ourselves well so we can serve others better. And I hope you have a good rest of your day and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.